Ma'am, stop right there. The voice cut through the hum of the mall like a blade through glass. And in the next second, everything slowed. Naomi Carter's wrist was gently but firmly taken, the cool touch of metal circling her skin with a quiet click that echoed louder than it should have, drawing eyes from every direction as conversations faded into a low murmur, shoppers pausing mid-step, phones subtly lifting, the polished marble floor reflecting the bright overhead lights that now seemed too harsh, too exposing. Naomi stood still, her breath steady, her posture calm, a small paper bag slipping from her fingers and landing softly near her feet. Inside it, a child's birthday gift wrapped in blue paper with silver stars, now tilted slightly to one side. Unnoticed by everyone except her, Officer Daniel Hayes adjusted his stance beside her, his grip controlled but unquestioning, his voice firm, practiced. "We've had a report, you match the description." His words carried authority, but also assumption, the kind that didn't wait for answers. Naomi turned her head just enough to meet his gaze, her expression not angry, not afraid, just quiet, searching. "There must be a mistake," she said, her voice low, even, almost lost beneath the distant echo of footsteps and the soft hum of escalators. But she didn't pull away, didn't resist, didn't raise her voice. Instead, she stood grounded, like someone who understood something deeper than the moment unfolding around her. A child, nearby, tugged at his mother's sleeve, whispering something no one else could hear, while a security guard lingered at a distance, unsure whether to step closer or stay back. The air felt heavier now, charged with something unspoken. Naomi's bracelet, a simple gold band, slipped from her wrist as it was secured and dropped to the floor, spinning once before settling into stillness, catching a shard of light that flickered like a quiet signal. She glanced down for just a second, then back up, her eyes steady again. "Please," she added softly, "call your supervisor." But Officer Hayes had already turned slightly, speaking into his radio, his tone clipped, procedural. The response crackled back, indistinct but confirming, the kind of confirmation that didn't question itself. Naomi exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxed, not in surrender, but in control, as if she was choosing calm in a moment designed to take it from her. Around them, the mall continued, but differently now, slower, quieter, as if everyone was waiting for something to break, something to shift. But Naomi didn't move, didn't plead, didn't explain further. She simply stood there in the center of it all, composed in a way that didn't match the situation, as if she already knew something no one else in that moment could see. And somewhere beyond the glass doors, far past the parking lot lines and the fading afternoon sun, something had already begun to move. Naomi did not lower her gaze, even as the quiet tension around her thickened, the sound of the radio still buzzing faintly at Officer Hayes' shoulder, while another officer approached from behind, slower this time, more cautious, as if the stillness in Naomi's posture had shifted something subtle in the air. Her hands remained steady at her sides, the metal resting against her skin no longer drawing attention from her. Instead, her eyes moved once more toward the small gift bag on the floor, the corner slightly crushed now by the passing of hurried footsteps, a detail so small, yet so heavy it lingered longer than the accusation itself. "Ma'am, do you have identification?" the second officer asked, his tone less certain, almost searching. Naomi nodded gently, not defensive, not rushed, reaching slowly into her coat pocket with deliberate care, every movement measured, visible, transparent. She handed over a simple leather wallet, worn at the edges, the kind that had been used for years, not replaced for style. Inside it, her identification rested among a few folded receipts and a photograph barely visible beneath the plastic sleeve. Officer Hayes took it without a word, glancing down quickly, then again, his brow tightening just slightly, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough to create a pause, a fracture in the certainty he had held just moments before. The crowd had not moved on. They lingered, some pretending to shop, others openly watching, waiting for confirmation of what they had already decided. Naomi's voice came again, softer this time but clearer. "I was just buying a gift for my son," she said, not as an excuse, not as a defense, but as a simple truth placed into a space that had not asked for it. The words hung there, fragile yet steady. The second officer shifted his weight, glancing at Hayes, then back at Naomi. Uncertainty creeping in through the cracks of routine. Dispatch is still checking. Hayes said into his radio, his voice firmer than he felt, reinforcing something he needed to hold on to. Naomi did not respond. She only inhaled slowly, her shoulders rising and falling with a rhythm that seemed untouched by the pressure surrounding her. As if she had practiced this kind of stillness before, as if she understood that moments like this were not won with volume, but with presence. A faint reflection of red and blue lights flickered across the glass storefront behind her, not from nearby vehicles, but from somewhere farther out, too distant to be noticed yet, too real to ignore. Naomi's eyes shifted briefly toward the entrance of the mall, just a flicker, then back to the officers, her expression unchanged, composed, grounded. The second officer handed the wallet back more carefully this time, almost respectfully, though no words followed. The silence stretched, not empty, but filled with something building beneath the surface, something neither side had named yet. You can wait. In the vehicle, Hayes said finally, his tone controlled, but now lacking the sharp edge from before. Naomi gave a small nod, not agreeing, not resisting, simply acknowledging. As she stepped forward, the bracelet on the floor caught the light once more, unnoticed again by everyone except the child who had been watching from a distance. The child took a step closer, then stopped, sensing something even they could not explain. Outside, beyond the wide glass doors, the air had shifted, vehicles moving with purpose now, quiet but precise, and though no one inside had fully realized it yet, the moment they thought they understood was already beginning to change. The patrol car door opened with a muted thud, not loud but final, and Naomi stepped inside without hesitation. The seat cooled beneath her as the world outside the window blurred into reflections of glass and moving shadows. Officer Hayes remained standing for a moment longer than necessary, his hand resting near the door frame, as if something unseen had interrupted the routine he had followed 100 times before. Then he closed the door gently, not the abrupt motion from earlier, but controlled, measured, as though the situation had quietly shifted without his permission. Inside the car, Naomi sat upright, her hands resting loosely in her lap, her breathing steady, her eyes focused not on the officers but on the faint reflection of herself in the window, where the passing silhouettes of shoppers stretched and dissolved across the surface. The radio crackled again, sharper this time, and Hayes turned slightly, bringing it closer to his ear. Unit 12, confirm status. The voice on the other end sounded different now, less routine, more alert. Hayes pressed the button. Detained female, possible match, awaiting confirmation. His words came out evenly, but his jaw tightened just enough to betray the tension forming beneath his composure. There was a pause, longer than expected. Then a second voice cut in, overlapping the first, more urgent, more direct. Unit 12, stand by. Do not proceed further until instructed. Hayes frowned slightly, glancing toward his partner, who had already noticed the change. Their eyes met for a brief second, unspoken questions passing between them. Naomi remained still, but her gaze shifted slightly toward the front seat, not in curiosity, but in quiet awareness, as if she had anticipated the turn before it arrived. Outside, the subtle hum of engines grew closer, not loud, not chaotic, but deliberate, synchronized. A line of dark vehicles moving with purpose through the outer lanes of the parking lot, unnoticed by most, but not by the security guard near the entrance, who straightened instinctively, his posture shifting as recognition flickered across his face. Back inside the car, Hayes spoke again into the radio. Dispatch, clarify instructions, his voice now edged with something he had not felt before, uncertainty. The response came quickly this time, clear, unmistakable. Unit 12, you are to hold position, do not transport. Repeat, do not transport. The words landed heavier than the situation had warranted moments ago, and for the first time, Hayes looked directly at Naomi through the rearview mirror. Really looked, not at her clothing, not at the situation, but at her presence, her stillness, her composure. Something did not align, something he could not yet name. Naomi met his reflection calmly, her expression unchanged, but her eyes steady, grounded, not defensive, not pleading, just present. Outside, the vehicles had come to a quiet stop, doors opening in near silence, figures stepping out with precision, their movements coordinated, purposeful, not rushed, not aggressive, simply controlled, the kind of control that did not need to announce itself. The air around the mall entrance shifted, subtle but undeniable, like the moment before a storm changes direction. Inside the patrol car, the radio fell silent again, but the silence was no longer empty. It was waiting, and as Hayes exhaled slowly, his grip on the steering wheel tightening just slightly, he realized that whatever he thought this moment was, it was no longer his to define. The air outside the patrol car shifted in a way that did not need sound to be understood, a quiet alignment of movement that drew attention without demanding it. And Officer Hayes felt it before he saw it, his fingers loosening slightly on the steering wheel as he turned his head toward the entrance of the mall, where the glass doors slid open with mechanical precision, revealing figures stepping forward in measured coordination. Their presence calm but undeniable, not hurried, not aggressive. Just exact, each step placed with intention, the kind of discipline that came from something far beyond routine patrol. Shoppers near the entrance slowed, conversations softened, even the security guard who had lingered uncertain moments before now stood completely still, his posture straightened as recognition settled across his face. Inside the patrol car the radio remained silent, but the silence now carried weight, expectation. Hayes opened the door slowly and stepped out, the late afternoon light catching on his badge as he adjusted his stance, trying to maintain the authority he had held minutes ago. But something in the atmosphere made that authority feel smaller, narrower, as if it no longer filled the space the same way. His partner followed, more cautious now, eyes fixed on the approaching group. Naomi remained seated in the back, her gaze shifting slightly toward the open door, the reflection of movement passing across her eyes. Not surprise, not fear, just recognition, as though she had been waiting for this exact moment to arrive. One of the approaching figures moved ahead of the others, his pace unhurried, his presence commanding without effort. He did not raise his voice, did not gesture sharply, yet the space seemed to adjust around him, creating a path that did not need to be asked for. Hayes took a step forward, instinct guiding him to meet whoever was now approaching. But the words he had prepared, the firm explanations, the rehearsed authority, none of them came out, because something deeper interrupted them, something that told him this was no longer a situation he fully understood. The man stopped a few feet away, his eyes moving briefly over the scene, taking in every detail with a single glance: the patrol car, the officers, the gathered onlookers, and finally, Naomi, still seated, still composed. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, and in that moment, everything else seemed to fall away. The tension, the noise, the assumptions, replaced by something quieter, heavier. Hayes felt it then, the shift he had been resisting, the realization pressing in without permission. The man's voice came, low, controlled, carrying just enough to be heard clearly without needing to rise. "I believe there has been a mistake," he said, not as a question, not as a challenge, but as a statement that did not require agreement. Hayes swallowed slightly, his posture adjusting without him realizing it. "Sir, we were responding to a report," he began, his tone measured, but no longer certain. The man listened without interruption, his expression unchanged, but his presence alone seemed to draw the edges of the moment tighter, clearer, as if everything unnecessary had been stripped away behind him. The rest of the group remained still, silent, their attention fixed, not on the crowd, not on the officers, but on Naomi, as though she was the center of something far larger than the situation anyone had assumed. Hayes glanced once more toward the patrol car, toward Naomi, and for the first time, the question he had not allowed himself to ask surfaced fully, not about what she had done, but about who she truly was, and why. In this moment, it felt like he had stepped into something he should have seen coming but never did. Officer Hayes felt the shift settle fully into his chest now, not sudden, not explosive, but heavy, undeniable, like a door closing behind him without sound. The man standing before him did not move closer, did not raise his voice, yet everything about the moment bent subtly in his direction, as if the rules had quietly changed without announcement. Hayes cleared his throat, trying to regain footing. "Sir, We were acting on a report from store security, possible theft, he said, choosing his words carefully, slower now, aware that each one carried more weight than before. The man's gaze did not leave him, steady, measured, listening without interruption, then shifting slightly past him toward the patrol car, where Naomi remained seated, still composed, still silent, the late afternoon light catching along the edge of the door frame, outlining her figure in a soft glow that contrasted sharply with the tension surrounding her. "And did you confirm that report before placing her in custody?" the man asked, his tone even, not accusatory, but precise, like a question that already understood the answer. Hayes hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but it was enough for his partner to notice, enough for the silence behind them to deepen. "We had a description," Hayes replied, the words sounding thinner now, less certain as they left his mouth. The man nodded once, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement, as if placing that answer exactly where it belonged. Description is not confirmation," he said calmly, and the sentence landed with more force than any raised voice could have carried. Hayes felt the eyes of the crowd still lingering, but now they felt different, less certain, less aligned with him, as if the narrative they had accepted moments ago was beginning to unravel in real time. His partner shifted again, stepping slightly back, instinctively creating distance from a situation that no longer felt routine. The man took one step closer, not aggressive, not rushed, simply closing the space with quiet authority. "I would like her released," he continued, not as a request, but as a natural next step. Hayes exhaled slowly, his mind racing through protocol, through procedure, through everything he had relied on minutes earlier, but none of it seemed to fit the moment anymore. Not completely, not cleanly. His radio remained silent at his shoulder, no guidance, no reinforcement, just the echo of the instruction that had already told him to stop. Behind the man, the rest of the group remained still, watching, waiting, not intervening, not needing to, because their presence alone had already shifted the balance. Hayes turned his head slightly toward the patrol car again, toward Naomi, and for the first time, he saw not a suspect, not a situation, but a person he had not fully seen before, someone whose calm had never matched the accusation placed on her, someone who had asked for clarity instead of reacting, someone who had not once raised her voice even when the entire space had turned against her. His hand moved slowly toward the door, not forced, not commanded, but guided by something deeper than instruction, something closer to realization, the kind that arrives too late to prevent a mistake, but just in time to acknowledge it. And as his fingers brushed the handle, he understood that whatever came next would not erase what had already happened, only reveal it more clearly. The handle clicked softly under Officer Hayes's hand, a small sound that somehow carried through the stillness like a signal, and for a moment he did not open the door, he just stood there, fingers resting against the metal, as if the weight of that simple action had grown heavier than he expected. Behind him the presence of the man remained steady, not pressing, not rushing, but certain, like time itself had slowed to allow the moment to reveal what it needed to. Hayes finally pulled the door open, the hinges moving without resistance, and stepped slightly aside, his posture no longer squared in command but shifted, uncertain, making space. Naomi looked up at him, her eyes calm, not triumphant, not resentful, just present. She moved slowly, carefully, stepping out of the car with the same quiet control she had held from the beginning, her shoes touching the pavement with a soft, grounded sound. The air outside felt different now, cooler somehow, though the sun had not yet begun to set. The man stepped forward just enough to meet her at eye level, and in that brief moment when they stood facing each other, something unspoken passed between them, recognition, trust, something deeper than explanation. Naomi gave a small nod, not formal, not exaggerated, just enough to acknowledge his presence, his arrival, his understanding. He returned it with equal restraint, then turned his attention back to the officers, the shift immediate, but not abrupt. "Is she free to go?" he asked, the question simple, but the space it filled made it impossible to ignore. Hayes straightened slightly, his voice quieter now, stripped of the edge it had carried before. "Yes, sir," he said, and the word "sir" felt different this time, not automatic, not routine, but intentional. Naomi reached down briefly, her hand moving toward the ground where her bracelet had fallen earlier. But she paused, noticing it was no longer there. Her gaze lifted slightly, scanning the nearby space, then stopping as the small child from before stepped forward, hesitant but determined, holding the bracelet in both hands. The child's eyes met hers for a second before extending it. Naomi's expression softened, just a fraction, the smallest shift. She accepted it. Gently. "Thank you," she said, her voice warm, quiet. The child nodded quickly and stepped back, returning to the safety of distance. The moment lingered, delicate, almost fragile, then passed. The man beside her observed it without comment, but something in his posture eased, as if the simplicity of that exchange mattered more than anything that had been said. Hayes watched it too, his chest tightening slightly, not from fear, not from pressure, but from the slow realization of what had unfolded, not just the mistake, but the way it had been carried, the way Naomi had held herself through it, without escalation, without anger, without losing something essential. He cleared his throat again, but no. Words followed, because none seemed to fit anymore. Naomi adjusted her sleeve slightly, the bracelet now secure around her wrist once more, the gold catching the light again. But this time not as something lost, something overlooked, but something restored, something seen. The man turned slightly toward her, his voice low, meant only for her. "Are you all right?" he asked, and Naomi met his gaze with that same steady calm. "I am," she replied, and there was no hesitation in it, no trace of the tension that had surrounded her moments before, just a quiet certainty that settled into the space between them. And as the crowd began to disperse slowly, conversations resuming in softer tones, the world seemed to move again, but differently, as if something invisible had shifted beneath it, something that would not be easily undone. The space between everyone seemed to settle into something quieter now, but not empty, not resolved, just suspended, like the moment after a truth surfaces, but before anyone fully understands what to do with it. Officer Hayes remained where he stood, his hands no longer reaching for anything. No radio, no door, no authority to hold on to. Just resting at his sides as his eyes followed Naomi for a second longer than necessary, trying to reconcile the image he had built with the reality now. Standing in front of him, the man beside her turned slightly, his presence still composed, still controlled, but now unmistakably defined. No longer just a figure of quiet authority, but someone whose role carried weight beyond the scene itself. One of the officers in the group behind him stepped forward just enough to speak, his voice low, respectful. "Colonel Reed, perimeter is secure." The words landed softly, but they carried far enough for Hayes to hear, for his partner to hear, for the understanding to finally arrive in full, not as a shock, but as a realization that had been building from the moment the first instruction came through the radio. Hayes blinked once, slowly, the name settling into place. Colonel Marcus Reed. The title alone enough to redraw everything that had just happened, but it was not the title that held his attention. Now, it was the connection, the way the colonel's gaze returned to Naomi, not as an authority addressing a situation, but as a man grounding himself in someone he trusted, someone he recognized beyond rank. Naomi did not react to the title being spoken, did not shift, did not acknowledge it in any visible way, as if it had never been the point, as if it still was not. She simply adjusted the strap of her bag, lifting it gently from where it had fallen earlier, brushing a faint trace of dust from its side. The small blue gift inside settling back into place, a quiet reminder of why she had been there in the first place. The colonel turned back toward Hayes, his expression unchanged, but now there was clarity in it, something direct, unmistakable. "My wife was detained based on an unverified assumption," he said, his voice steady, not raised, not sharp, but carrying a precision that left no room for interpretation. Hayes felt the words land deeper than anything else that had been said, not because of the rank behind them, but because of the truth inside them. He nodded once, slowly. "Yes, sir," he replied, and this time the word carried acknowledgement, not just of position, but of error. The colonel held his gaze for a moment longer, then gave a slight nod, not dismissive, not forgiving, just complete, as if the moment had reached its necessary point. Naomi stepped forward then, closing the small distance between them, her movement calm, Unhurried, she did not look at Hayes, did not return to the officers. Her focus remained ahead, steady, as if she had already moved beyond what had just happened. But as she passed, she paused for just a second, her voice soft but clear, enough to be heard. Next time, make sure you see the person, not just the report, she said, not as a reprimand, not as a lesson delivered with force, but as something quieter, something meant to stay. Hayes did not respond immediately, the words settling into him, not pushing, not accusing, just existing in a way that could not be ignored. Naomi continued walking, the colonel beside her now, their pace aligned without effort, the group behind them following at a respectful distance. The crowd had thinned, the tension dissolved into something more reflective, more uncertain, as if everyone who had witnessed the moment now carried a piece of it with them, something unfinished, something that would not fade as easily as it had begun. And as Hayes stood there, watching them move away, he realized that the moment had not ended when she was released. It had only just begun to mean something. The glass doors of the mall slid open again as Naomi and Colonel Reed stepped outside, the late afternoon light stretching across the pavement in long golden lines, the air cooler now, quieter, as if the world beyond the walls had not witnessed what had just unfolded, yet somehow carried its echo anyway. Naomi walked beside him with the same steady pace, her posture unchanged, her expression calm. But there was a softness now, something subtle beneath the surface, not relief, not exhaustion, just a quiet return to herself. Colonel Reed glanced at her briefly, not as a check, not as concern, but as a habit formed from understanding. "You handled that better than most would," he said, his voice low, even. Naomi let out a small breath, almost a smile, though it did not fully form. "It was not the first time," she replied, her tone gentle, matter of fact, not bitter, not heavy, just honest. The words lingered between them, not needing explanation, not asking for it. He nodded once, his gaze shifting forward again, absorbing that truth without trying to fix it, without trying to respond with something larger than what it was. Behind them, the vehicles remained parked in quiet formation, their presence no longer urgent, just existing. The officers standing near them relaxed slightly, their posture less rigid now, the moment no longer requiring tension, only awareness. Naomi paused near the curb, adjusting the small bag in her hand, the blue wrapping paper inside catching a flicker of sunlight again. She looked down at it for a second, then back up, as if reconnecting with the reason she had come there in the first place. Something simple, something human, untouched by everything that had tried to define her differently just minutes before. Colonel Reed followed her gaze, then looked back at her. "Do you still want to go home first?" he asked, his voice softer now. Naomi shook her head gently. "No. I promised him I would bring this today," she said, lifting the bag slightly, the smallest hint of warmth returning to her voice. The colonel nodded again, a quiet understanding passing between them. No discussion needed, no adjustment required, just alignment. They began walking toward the waiting vehicle, their steps unhurried, synchronized without effort, as if the moment behind them had already been placed where it belonged, not erased, not ignored, but carried forward in a different way. Near the entrance, Officer Hayes still stood, his figure smaller now against the wide glass facade, watching them leave, his expression no longer guarded, no longer certain, just reflective, as if the scene had rewritten something he could not easily undo. His partner approached him slowly, saying nothing at first, then finally, "You did not know," he said quietly. Hayes exhaled, his eyes still fixed ahead. "That is the problem," he replied, his voice low, not defensive, not dismissive, but acknowledging something deeper than the situation itself, something that extended beyond a single moment, beyond a single mistake. Inside the mall, the crowd had fully dispersed now, the space returning to its usual rhythm, footsteps echoing, conversations blending. But something invisible remained, something that had settled into the air and into the people who had seen it, something that would not be spoken out loud, but would not be forgotten either. Naomi reached the vehicle and paused before stepping in, her hand resting briefly on the door handle. She looked out once more, not back at the officers, not at the crowd, but at the open space ahead, the sky stretching wide above the parking lot. Clear, quiet, unchanged. Then she stepped inside, and the door closed softly behind her, leaving the moment suspended just long enough to be understood before it moved on. The vehicle moved smoothly through the fading light, the quiet hum of the engine blending with the soft rhythm of tires against asphalt. And inside, Naomi sat by the window, her reflection faint against the glass as the city passed in long, muted streaks. She held the small blue gift in her lap now, one hand resting gently over it, as if grounding herself in something simple, something certain. Colonel Reed sat beside her, not speaking, not needing to, his presence steady, familiar, the kind that did not fill silence but supported it. Outside, the world continued as it always had. People crossing streets, cars stopping at lights, storefronts glowing under early evening signs. Nothing outwardly changed, and yet something within the moment they had just left behind lingered quietly, not heavy, not loud, just present. Naomi's eyes followed the horizon for a moment, then lowered slightly, her thumb brushing along the edge of the wrapping paper where it had been creased, a small imperfection, barely noticeable, but real. She did not try to fix it. She simply let it be. He is going to like it, Colonel Reed said after a while, his voice low, certain. Naomi nodded, a faint warmth returning to her expression. He always notices the small things, she replied. And there was something deeper in that sentence, something that reached beyond the gift itself, something about being seen, truly seen. Without assumption, without condition, the car slowed as it approached a quiet residential street, trees lining the sidewalks, their leaves catching the last light of the day, casting soft shadows across the pavement. The vehicle came to a gentle stop, and for a second, neither of them moved, the stillness settling again. But this time it was different, not tense, not uncertain, just calm, complete. Naomi reached for the door handle, then paused, her gaze lifting toward the sky visible. Through the windshield, wide and open, unchanged by anything that had happened beneath it, she took a slow breath, steady, grounding, then opened the door and stepped out. The air cooler here, quieter, carrying none of the noise from before. Colonel Reed followed, closing the door softly behind him. They walked side by side toward the house, their steps aligned, unhurried, the path ahead simple, familiar, the kind that did not demand anything from them except presence. As they reached the front door, Naomi stopped briefly, adjusting the gift in her hands, the blue paper catching one last trace of fading sunlight. She looked at it for a moment, then lifted her gaze forward, her expression calm, resolved, not shaped by what had happened, but informed by it. Inside the house, a faint light glowed through the window, warm, steady, waiting. She stepped forward and opened the door, and as it closed quietly behind them, the world outside continued on, unchanged, yet carrying the silent echo of a moment where something unseen had finally been brought into the light, not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly enough that it could no longer be ignored.